The moment I stepped into my graduation party, I saw it. My father's hand hovering over my champagne glass, a faint drift of powder dissolving before the bubbles settled. The room clapped for a future they thought they understood, lights glowing warm against a truth no one else seemed to notice. I didn't speak. I didn't flinch. I just stood smiling and carried that glass across the ballroom to my sister, placing it gently into her waiting hand. She drank without hesitation, and as the applause rose again, I realized the real question wasn't what they planned for me, but why they needed it. I learned early what it meant to take up less space in a family that pretended to love symmetry. Long before the ballroom lights and the champagne stem trembling in my hand, there was a smaller room, a smaller stage, and a smaller version of me standing beside a girl who never had to earn the spotlight she lived in. I was 9 the first time I understood the pattern. It was an elementary school awards ceremony held in a cafeteria that smelled of warm plastic and orange drink. I'd spent weeks on a science poster, hand-drawn charts, carefully labeled diagrams. Celine, 2 years older, had forgotten hers at home and slapped together something during recess. When they called her name, my parents rose so fast their chairs scraped the floor. Damon pulled out his phone. Clarice clapped with a sharp, delighted precision. My name wasn't called at all. I remember staring at the reflection of the fluorescent lights bouncing off the waxy tile beneath my shoes. I remember the exact sound my Aunt Helena made when she exhaled beside me, a quiet, measured breath that felt like a warning. After the ceremony, while everyone fussed over Selene, she bent to my height and straightened the collar of my shirt. Due to she whispered, even though she spoke English everywhere else, not your silence, just your posture. I didn't understand it then. I do now. Years passed, but the script rarely changed. At 14, I placed first in a citywide math competition. Damien told relatives that Celine had been the one tutoring me. When I tried correcting him, Clarice's hand brushed my shoulder in a way that froze the rest of my sentence. "Don't make this complicated," she murmured, smiling brightly for the guests. At 16, Celine was given a used car for her birthday. I received a planner, the kind with inspirational quotes and blank grids, a tool for someone who knows how to stay organized, Clarice said. Damien nodded as if that were praise. I wrote in it for 2 months, then stopped when I realized every page felt like an instruction to become smaller. College didn't change anything. Every scholarship I earned was met with a story about how we worked hard to support both our girls. Every project I finished was retold as something Celine helped guide. I stopped correcting the details. It was like tossing stones into the ocean the surface barely changed. There was one night in particular I returned to more than I want to admit. A family dinner at a restaurant overlooking the water. I'd just received notice of a research placement, something competitive, something I wanted. I waited for the right moment to share, timing my breath with the rise and fall of conversation. When I finally spoke, Celine interrupted halfway through to announce she'd been invited to a networking brunch. My parents erupted with admiration. My words hung unfinished in the air like steam before dissolving. Rowan, who'd come along that night, noticed. I saw their eyes flick to me, caught between sympathy and caution. They were the first person to ever say, I saw that. Patterns don't emerge from grand stories. They come from repetition, the missed acknowledgments, the overwritten achievements, the practiced smiles, the way a room rearranges itself around one person's comfort. By the time I reached graduation, I didn't need anyone to explain my place in the family narrative. I'd been living in the margin for years. What I didn't know, what none of us knew yet, was how quickly a margin could become the center when someone finally stopped shrinking. The ballroom was loud enough to feel alive, but quiet enough for intentions to hide. I could sense the hierarchy the moment I stepped inside. Who drifted towards Celine, who hovered near my parents, who offered me the polite nod reserved for someone technically invited, but not essential to the room. I found my seat near the kitchen doors, the heat from the swinging panels brushing the back of my chair every time a server passed, a placement meant to look accidental. Clarice excelled at arrangements that didn't appear arranged. Across the room, Selene laughed at something Damon whispered to her. Their silhouettes were framed by the soft glow of the chandeliers, a picture so polished it almost convinced me it was real. I traced a fingertip along the rim of my water glass, steadying my breath the way Helena had taught me. One measured inhale, one measured inhale, one measured release. Then the host called for a toast. Champagne flutes appeared like synchronized choreography. I watched the server set mine down, a clean, cold stem catching the light. I reached for it just as Damien moved in behind me. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. His hand hovered above my glass fingers, adjusting a fork that didn't need adjusting. His body blocked the view from most of the room, but not from me. I saw the small motion, the slight tilt, a faint dust drifting into the bubbles before dissolving. A ripple, a swirl, then nothing. He stepped back with the practiced ease of a man who'd done this sort of thing before. Sleight of hand, sleight of truth, sleight of daughter. Clarice glanced over her smile, holding just a beat too long, as if waiting for something to begin. I kept my posture, smoothed my dress once, lifted the glass without drinking. For a moment, the room blurred into soft shapes, gold-white movement, while the center of it sharpened to one truth: I wasn't meant to walk out of this night untouched. But I would choose how the story shifted next. I didn't drink the champagne. I let the bubbles settle while my pulse steadied into something almost calm. Across the room, Selene lifted her own glass in a half-hearted cheer, oblivious, glowing in the soft light, like she had been cast instead of born. Damien's eyes flicked toward me once, quick assessing before he turned to greet another round of guests. Clarice followed his lead, her smile gleaming her posture, proud, the perfect mother in the perfect scene. But scenes are only scenes, and I'd spent my whole life watching the edges. I set the champagne down. The stem clicked softly against the linen, but the sound felt louder than it should have, like a starting bell. Rowan caught my eye from across the room, their camera hanging loose at their side. They tilted their head slightly. The silent question, "Did you see it?" I gave a single nod. I stood smoothing the front of my dress and made my way toward the hallway behind the reception area. The air shifted as soon as I stepped past the last table, quieter, cooler, stripped of performance. This was the part of events people didn't photograph, the part where truth moved unobserved. In the corridor, I pulled my clutch closer and opened it just enough to see the documents Helena had given me earlier. Scholarship confirmations, payment records, financial statements I recognized immediately. She hadn't explained why she carried them. She never explained anything unless necessary. All she said when she slipped them into my hand on the balcony was, "When the moment comes, use these." At the time, I didn't know which moment she meant. Now I did. I moved deeper into the hall, away from the music, until all I could hear was the low hum of the building's ventilation and the muffled laughter bleeding through the walls. I stopped beside a service door. The thin seam of light beneath it told me someone was inside. I waited, listening. Voices. Damien's first quiet clipped steady. "Just make sure she drinks it. She won't cause a scene if it happens fast." Then Melius, the event coordinator. Her tone professional, detached. "The toast gives us a clean moment. Once the room is distracted, a rustle, a soft click, then Clarice's voice low and certain. It needs to look natural. A faint spell, nothing more. She'll recover. People will assume stress." Stress. The word landed like a cold hand against my spine. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just memorized every syllable. Then footsteps. I stepped back into the shadow until the door cracked open, and the three of them walked past me unaware. Their plan wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even imaginative. It was administrative, controlled, a narrative adjustment, the kind of quiet rewrite families like mine excelled at. But they'd made one mistake. They assumed I wasn't watching. I slid the clutch closed and walked back toward the ballroom. My breath was steady, my posture straight. No one glanced at me as I passed, not out of malice, but habit. I'd been invisible for years. Tonight, invisibility finally became useful. Back at my table, Rowan approached, pretending to check the lighting near the floral arrangements. Their voice barely carried. "I recorded his hand over your glass. It's clear." I didn't look at the phone they held, though I saw the reflection of a paused frame, the faint swirl in the champagne. "Keep it safe," I whispered. "Not yet." Rowan slipped the phone back into their pocket and blended into the crowd again, moving as if they belonged to every table and none. I picked up the champagne glass again. Not to drink, just to hold. Its weight felt different now. Not a threat, a tool, a symbol of a choice I hadn't asked for but suddenly understood. Across the room, Celine turned and caught my eye. She smiled, oblivious, the kind of smile that assumed affection without ever offering it. She lifted her glass, a fraction of silent toast to herself. I walked toward her through a sea of warm lights and colder intentions. "Yours is warmer," I said when I reached her table, offering my glass without a tremor. "Trade!" She laughed lightly. "You and your details, Violet." She took it without hesitation. One switch, one moment, one gesture, as gentle as returning a borrowed item. No accusation, no drama, nothing to cling to and say she meant harm. Just a quiet correction. A narrative shifted back into truth. I returned to my seat and picked up the new glass. My breath steadied, my shoulders loosened. The ballroom continued its swirl of conversation and carefully curated celebration. Damien watched me from across the room, expression unreadable. Clarice touched his arm, whispering something I couldn't hear. But for the first time all night, I didn't feel small. I felt aligned, because they'd built a plan meant to collapse me quietly. They hadn't considered what would happen if I let gravity fall the other way. The room shifted the way a tide does quietly at first, then all at once. Milea stepped onto the small stage, her sequined dress catching the chandelier light. She tapped the microphone twice, summoning the next portion of the evening with the kind of confidence only someone following a script can hold. "Everyone," she said, "please raise your glasses for our graduate." Around the ballroom, champagne flutes lifted in a shimmering arc. The room glowed gold. Everyone looked where they were supposed to look. Everyone except Rowan. They stood near the edge of the crowd, hand already slipping into their movement, waiting. I kept my glass low, not enough to draw notice, just enough to watch. Across the table, Selene lifted hers, the glass Damien had prepared, and smiled at the guests clustered around her. She didn't sip yet. She liked to wait for the exact moment attention swung her way. Damien's gaze flicked between us, just once, quick, nervous. The toast began to violently stir. A brilliant young woman with a bright future ahead of her. A line drawn with elegance and spoken without sincerity. Celine finally brought the glass to her lips. A small sip, barely more than a taste. The room applauded oblivious. Nothing dramatic happened. No stumbling, no gasp. Just a soft tightening around her eyes. A faint press of her hand to her temple. The harmless mixture Damien intended only caused slight dizziness. Enough to enough to derail, enough to create a story. She blinked once, twice. The edges of her posture softened around her. People murmured gentle concern, then confusion. Rowan's camera didn't move. They recorded everything, pivoting slowly, as though adjusting focus rather than capturing truth. I rose, not to help her, not to speak, but to walk toward the AV booth at the far corner of the ballroom. The technician inside looked up when I approached. He was young, nervous, and unfamiliar with the codes of our family, which made him perfect. "I need this played," I said quietly, sliding the USB onto the console. "Right now." He hesitated a second, then nodded. His fingers moved. The ballroom screen flickered. The slideshow of curated family photos vanished. In its place, a still frame of Damien's hand hovering over a champagne glass. A hush fell so suddenly, it felt like the room had appeared and forgotten how to exhale. The video played in silence. Rowan's recording, clear and undeniable. The slight bend of Damien's body blocking the view. The tilt of his wrist. The faint powder dissolving